Welcome to the Chiefs. The Chiefs is a Whiteark podcast aimed at specifically giving you an insight into what makes great leaders and entrepreneurs in a variety of organisations tick. We call them Chiefs. My name is James Ciuffatelli, and together with my Whiteark co-chief, Joe Hands, we're going to attempt to take you on a journey and talk to as many chiefs across as many industries as we can to give you an insight into A, what makes them tick, and B, what makes their enterprises thrive, and more importantly, what they've learnt along the way. The Chiefs.
Today I'm very excited to have Anthony Holdstock on The Chiefs. Anthony is the director and owner of Sharp Carter and has been with the business for nearly 8 years. For anyone who knows Anthony, his passion and dedication and focus on his people, on his clients, and on delivering exceptional service comes through time and time again. Looking forward to really understanding what makes him tick, working in his business in the recruitment industry, especially in the current COVID environment. Excellent, we're going to get started. Today we have Anthony from Sharp Carter, and I know Anthony really well, and we've had a lot of coffees together, but not recently in this COVID period. But Anthony is a director and owner of Sharp Carter, a very successful recruitment firm that I have personally used and I personally partner with as part of Whiteark. So we're going to spend the next 25 minutes understanding what makes Anthony tick, lessons he has learned over his career, what gets him out of bed in the morning, what keeps his energy and ideas flowing, and he's got a lot of them. So thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us today. We're looking forward to hearing all about you and understanding how you tick, a bit more about Sharp Carter, and a little bit more about you. So if you could please describe yourself in 5 words. This is a tough one.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Lovely to be here with you guys. Yeah, it's a really good question, describing myself in 5 words. I actually asked my wife this, and I think she had the word Dave Hughes in there, which she used as 2 words. And so this podcast is going to have appearance, but then if it does, you'll probably see the likeness to Dave Hughes. Good question. I think describing myself around who I am or who I want to be, I think is probably the key. I mean, I want to be someone who's engaging and personable, but I also want to be humble. I think I also want to be known for being, excellent. I think everyone's got their own definition of what excellence means, but I think for me, they're the sorts of things I want to be known for, is to somebody who does what they say they're going to do, I suppose. But I think I've used more than 5 words, Joe, so sorry about that.
That's okay. I like excellence, right? I think it's a really good summary, Anthony, of what you stand for. You're one of those people that, you meet with you have a conversation, you follow through, and everything you try and do is at the excellent quality. And I think that excellence has probably got you where you are from a business perspective and where you're going to go, right, in the future. So you have a burst of energy and you're very passionate. So what drives your passion, and how do you keep those right energy levels?
I mean, for me, when I set out, my goal was to be the best employer in Australia. And I'm in business with two gentlemen, Steve Carter and Christian Keogh, who were excellent, and we all had different whys when we started out, but I think being the best employer, it's a really big statement. It's a huge statement with not really much to justify and to measure on, but I think it's just a constant strive for trying to make sure we've got an unbelievable environment and have great people who want to work with us and work in that environment. So I think the energy side of things comes from that, but I feel like that's a goal that's probably one of those goals that you never really actually know when you get there, or you never know whether you achieve it, but you're always just striving for it. So I think the energy comes from that, but it's a really fascinating question, what drives your energy. But I think in terms of the way in which I maintain energy is I'm a big advocate for sleep. I'm a really big advocate for exercise. I'm probably a really big advocate for what I classify as mental fitness. So I think a lot of people talk about mental health. There's a guy who worked with us previously, Hadley Fisher, who set up a business in resilience, and a lot of his chat is about mental fitness. And I think for me, that's probably the things that I try and practice is nutrition, what's going in, exercise, sleep, and trying to do all of the things right as much as I can just to have as much energy when it comes to work, but also when it comes to family, when it comes to friends, to be able to be on for those occasions, I think is really important.
Yeah, and how do you, and this one's a little bit off in terms of the script that I'm supposed to follow, but how do you compartmentalize between work and home and, you know, friends and family and personal when you're running your own business and you're thinking about the next idea and you're planning? Like, how do you find that right balance?
It's pretty challenging. I think the things that I've learnt to do, I think, Joe, is just make sure I'm probably very ritualised in some of the things that I do. Like I exercise pretty much every morning. So I get up before 5 every day.
Yeah.
Normally I'm out the door exercising, whether it's a training session. I usually train like a sort of cardio workout every second day, and every other day I run. My running time's often my thinking time. And it's also, I think now that we're been in a COVID situation, so the commute to work used to be for me my audio book and my learning time.
Yeah.
I'll substitute my run now to get through the pain of running 10 kilometres every second day is to actually listen to audiobooks whilst I'm running. And often I can get 4 or 5 kilometres in before I've even realised I'm running, just because I'm listening and learning. I think then it's trying to switch off and just having a good little meditation session to get into family time and get prepped for the chaos that is 2 boys, 3 and 18 months. And and then I think it's just trying to transition. So I always make sure, well, I mean, today's an exception to the rule, but normally I don't start work until 8. And when I knock off, it tries to be phones down and laptops off for a period of time until the family are settled and maybe sleeping, and then potentially logging on after that. And I think we're really lucky in our industry. Like our industry follows the working week typically. So it's very, very rare customer activity on the weekends. And I did say to someone yesterday, I find it almost impossible. I took a week off last week. Switching off midweek while everyone else is working, I find almost impossible. But Christmas period's great because our industry shuts down. Easter period's great because the industry shuts down. So
it's really good advice. And that whole, I like the concept of mental fitness, you know, finding a way to kind of transition between the different things you're doing in your day, especially in the COVID world where you might be sitting in the same house. So you haven't got that drive to and from work to switch off, or the public transport. Your thing around learning, so you're listening to podcasts or you're listening to whatever and just continually learning. And going back to something you said around, you know, being the best employer, I suppose you're right. Even if today you said we are the best employer, that actual target continues to move to continue to be that, right? And that's the same for any company. It's not really about what you did in the last 12 months. It's about what you're going to do in the next 12 months that people assess you on. So it's that continued strive for excellence, right? Which kind of sounds like drives you rather than tires you out.
Yeah, I think so. I think I kind of liken it like I was a very average Aussie rules footballer back in the day. And I think it's a little bit like that. Like you have a premiership every year, and you kind of set out to win the premiership every year, and sometimes you fall short and other times you make it, but you reset the year after and you go again. And I think that's the mentality. And in the recruitment industry as well, it tends to be, you know, and it's probably not just recruitment industry, it's just business in general. It tends to be month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year, that you're always looking to continually reset and start again and deliver. So I don't think it really changes, but the goals are always the same, but it's just about how do you get there and what do you do during that time.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm really interested. Obviously, I've worked with you through Sharp and Carter, and you've got an amazing array of different talent. And from a brand perspective, you're very well positioned in the marketplace. But I'm really interested to know, why did you set up Sharp and Carter? Like, could you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Joe, it was set up by 2 gentlemen, Steve Carter and Sharp, back in 2009. And both had been big ex-agency recruiters and went out in the middle of the GFC and set up their own 2-person operation. And it grew over their first 4 years to about 7 people. Where I intersected is I'm an accountant by trade. I started my journey in a chartered accounting firm in Bendigo, of all places. I'm a country person. And then I transitioned into recruitment back at the start of 2010 into 2009. And I joined a really large multinational recruitment agency. And to be honest with you, Joe, I loved it. I'd been for almost 8-9 years, and getting into the thick of recruitment where you're actually meeting people every day and your job is to actually talk to people, place people into opportunities. I thought I would landed on my dream job, if I'm really honest. And there were so many things I really loved about big agency, but then there were a lot of things that I didn't. And over that journey, I only spent 3.5 years there, but I met some amazing humans. And through that time, I think the things that I loved were the teamwork and the collaboration and the job. And I loved a lot of the celebrations of success that organisation had. I loved their training and development that organisation had. What I probably didn't like were, I felt that people were almost a commodity. I felt that there was probably, everything was about growth and profit. And when I put my thinking hat on, it really was only due to the ownership structure. It was a listed business globally.
Right.
And within a listed organisation, like any listed organisation, I'm not knocking listed organisations, they're here and they're going to be here today, and they serve a great purpose. But for a professional services firm, I just coming from an accounting background, I couldn't understand why, a Deloitte's and a PwC and most of the large legal firms globally, most of the large professional service firms globally are all set up under partnership structure, as opposed to recruitment, which was predominantly set up under a listed structure. And for me, partnership made sense so much more because the behaviour then shifts to customer. But for me, it was probably even more than that. I think my sole reasons really for creating this organisation, or the organisation that we're in now, was probably around how do we treat our people really well, first and foremost. How do we create an organisation where people don't want to leave? How do you create an organisation where you'd be really happy for your children and their children to come and work in and to be proud of in an industry that's probably tarnished with a pretty awful brush, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
So those were the things that we set out to do, and the partnership structure made a lot of sense because we felt if we had really happy people and we had great people that were happy and engaged, then the customer satisfaction that we would get from one of my consultants working with you, Joe, would be they would care and hopefully, treat you really well as a person looking for a job, but also as a person potentially employ people as well. And so we always talk customer, not candidate, not client, trying to distinguish who's paying the bills and who's actually helping us make money. It's just literally customer. And they're the things that we really focused on as an organisation. So that's sort of how and where but I think also what happened in that journey was I was great friends and still am now with this guy, Christian Keogh, who'd been at this larger organisation for about 10 years. And him and I sat down at a Christmas party and said, what do you think? And I said, why don't we do it for ourselves? And as we were getting close to jumping, Steve Carter reached out, and he was going through a transition with Tim Sharp at the time. And he was one of my biggest competitors. And he said, look, Anthony, are you interested in buying into Sharp Carter? And Christian and I came across, and Tim left the business back at the start of 2013, and we became Sharp Carter. So we were 8 people when we joined in 2013, and I think we've been up to about 130 people across Australia. So
that's fantastic. You know what I love, and I know you speak about this a lot, is, a lot of companies do that. Let's focus on our customer, right? But they don't get that clear link between, if you get the employee engagement piece right, it flows through to your customer. A lot of companies don't get that connection right. They focus more on how do we improve the customer experience, and they don't focus enough on how do we actually improve the employee experience, because that's actually going to have the biggest impact on the customer. So I love that. And I think it's a really important lesson for every business that's thinking about how they think about their customer experience. And also, I like how you think about everyone you're dealing with as a customer, because it's a life cycle thing, right? So I could be a candidate, but a year later I could be a client, and then I could be a candidate again. And so actually building that relationship means that you're kind of along somebody's journey, depending on where they're employed, what they're doing, if they're looking for a job. So you get to kind of to see customers right along that journey where they're going into a new role, then they're building their team and kind of helping them through that kind of career piece.
It's a really interesting point that you make. Like, I often say we don't have any clients. My thought process is we have relationships with people. So we have a relationship with you, Joe, when you're in your census role, and you move to Australian Super, and our relationship just goes with you. And so we try to structure up our business knowing that as well. Like, obviously, over time, you start to win preferred supplier arrangements with businesses and you're winning tenders. So you are technically getting clients, but I think the relationships tend to be what keep you there and move with people really as they progress through their careers.
And, you know, in your journey getting to Sharp Carter, but in your journey, you know, since 2013, what have been the biggest lessons that you've learnt?
It's a really good question, Joe. Look, for me, the first thing I think when I talk about our business in particular, I think I want our business to be a walking example of this, is that I genuinely believe you need to have great people to make a great organisation.
Yeah.
And so I think the recruitment process that we've learned over the time, like, we're a recruitment agency, but I can put my hand up and say we've gotten it wrong internally so many times over the journey. But the amount of time that you save investing in upfront in getting the right person and not just settling. We're a recruitment agency, but we use recruiters to recruit our recruiters, external of our organisation, because we're so hell bent on getting the best possible people who are made of the right stuff. Like, we always talk about good humans is what we hire. We look to hire good humans because I know I can turn a good human into a good recruiter. I can't turn a good recruiter who's not a good human into a good human. So for us, that's our biggest piece that I think we've learnt over the journey, is that the amount of time that you save on the investment up front at the back end in terms of, you know, dealing with issues, dealing with problem people, it's just massive. I think the next thing for me has been the autonomy side of things. Like, I'm on the disc profile, I'm a sector 7D and a sector 7I, and one of the D traits is control.
Yeah.
And I think learning right from the start, when I bought into Sharp Carter in 2013, I was 30 years of age and I wanted to control everything, Joe. And I think the learning of knowing you don't have any control has been really empowering, and therefore giving complete autonomy and trust to people, you know, to hire great people, but to allow them to do the job that you hire them to do, has probably been one of the massive learnings for myself as well. And I think another thing that I think about quite regularly is putting a time value of money on yourself. I think when we transition from an 8-person business to a 21-person business, and then from a 21-person business to a 50-person business, and then from 50 to 100, when you're an 8-person business, you've got many hats, and you're probably going through this now.
Yeah.
You're the accountant, you're the tech person, you're the marketer, you're the salesperson, and you're the delivery person as well. Plus, you've got to run the office, plus you've got to order the stationery, you've got to do everything when you're a small business.
Yeah.
And I think what I often talk about is our time. You know, if I'm going to generate $1 million worth of revenue for Sharp Carter, my time's probably worth around about $800 an hour. Is that task that I'm doing worth $800 an hour, or isn't it? And trying to either outsource or in-source resources to actually probably, one, do it better than myself, but also utilise the time that we have, because the biggest commodity I think that we're lacking is time. And I think the last thing that I'm really passionate about is strengths.
Yeah.
For me, I'm really poor at admin. I'm really poor at, you know, getting things on the system. If any of my guys are listening to this podcast, they're probably going to be, hands up in agreement with all of that. And I cop a fair bit of flack internally, Joe, but I try and cover my weaknesses with great people, and ideally try and spend most of my time focused on where I am actually good and where I can deliver the most amount of value. And that's probably something we definitely didn't do as an organisation when we were 8 people. But as the business has grown, my role's probably taken more of a business development, a customer focused role, and maybe a training role internally. Whereas Christian has become an internal counsellor, if you like, to Sharp Carter, and Steve Carter's probably our face. Although, Christian and I probably argue we'd be better faces, but nonetheless. No, Steve's great in that space, and he's obviously been around for a long time, so he's well known.
I mean, there's a lot in that. I didn't realise that you actually use external recruiters to recruit your own people, but I think that whole getting the investment up front actually pays dividends, and you could probably do a financial model that proves keeping an employee and not having turnover and having the right employee and the productivity factors that you get out of that recruitment piece is probably one of the most important things you have to do. I mean, most companies, more than 60% of their costs are labor, right? Now, depending on what company you are, and if you've got like raw materials or whatever, but a large component of your cost base is labor, and it's fixed, right? Because a lot of people have full-time employees on their books or part-time employees on their books. Getting that piece right, and I think people underestimate the importance of that. And I've made some bad hiring decisions, and I made some great hiring decisions, but the impact of making a good or bad hiring decision is quite material in terms of how your business works, how your business unit works, if you can deliver the outcome that year. So I really liked that reflection on that Sharp and Carter see the importance so much that they actually use an external recruiter to do their recruitment is really fascinating insight. Yeah, no, really, really interesting. And working to your strengths and thinking about your time as money and whether or not what you're doing is to your strengths, but also is it what you should be focused on, right? And I think it's probably something that everyone should constantly challenge themselves about. So I think that's fantastic. I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about COVID and what you've seen as the impact of COVID on your businesses. And a lot of businesses have been impacted. And how do you think about the next 12 months for your business, and what are you focused on?
Our business got impacted pretty significantly, Joe. I think middle of March, we had about 355 roles we were recruiting across Australia. By the 1st of April, that number had dropped to about 85. So it was a really significant, really fast, rapid drop. And we had probably a 5-stage process of what our response was going to be to COVID. And within that 10 working day period, I think we went from stage 1 to stage 5. So it was pretty a significant drop. We saw May being our worst month this year, and that sort of, really probably scared us. It probably scared a lot of other recruitment agencies, but I'm assuming most businesses outside of essential service organisations were probably feeling the pinch at that time. Since June, we've been operating on average around about 200 to 220 roles across Australia now. I think one of the really interesting things this time around is that the global financial crisis hit, middle management got smashed and got taken out of roles. This time around, we haven't seen the redundancies that existed back then outside of businesses like travel and airlines and things that got hit on the front line really quickly. So it's going to be a really fascinating 6 to 12 months from our perspective. I think that we kind of feel there's going to be an impact on insolvency laws when they're reinstated as to what happens with businesses that are teetering on the edge. Yeah. We also think there's a significant drop off from a redundancy perspective once JobKeeper comes off in April next year, but we don't really know. I mean, we're prepping for May, 2 or 3 years of May, which we're hoping is the worst case scenario. What do we say? Always prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But I mean, for our business, there's so many great opportunities that have come from this. Like there's a great silver lining in all of this because it exposed every business practice that we had in our organisation. It exposed our cash flow system, it exposed our bonus systems, it exposed directors' distribution policies, this exposed our company structures, it exposed everything, Joe. So it's a really great opportunity, and it exposed our people as well. Like we saw probably for the first time the true personality of everyone when they're really under pressure. And so for us, it's been amazing insight into who can handle pressure, who are the people you turn to when it's going to get hot in the kitchen, who can stay calm. So I think for us now, it's about trying to utilise these learnings now to try and correct the issues that were there. And none of them were business critical issues that were going to sink the business. But they're just things that we can improve to become excellent on the other side. We sort of feel like we're in a really fortunate position because we're such a relationship-driven agency. I think, if I look back on our statistics over the last 6 months, we've won 90% of the work in the last 6 months through existing relationships. And I look at that, that's really, really powerful. So we're pretty comfortable either way. I mean, if it turns and becomes really, really good quickly, I think that'll be good for us. But if it goes for a long time, we might see a lot of competition drop off, and that will probably still be good for us. So regardless of the way you look at it, there's huge opportunity there. And then also I think the COVID situation's just allowed us to sit back and think about other opportunities and, other partnerships, strategic alliances that you can do, and other ways in which we can engage with our customer base to get deeper relationships so that we're better positioned for the other side.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And I think as companies think about how they're going from surviving to really getting out of this and what it looks like for them and all these different businesses, actually having the right talent is going to be critical. And they may have also found gaps in their world that they go, actually, we don't have that capability in our organization and we need it, right? We need to be looking. And so talent's going to become more and more important for organizations, I think, in this period, which is, hey, we can't necessarily afford to spend all the money we were spending, but on the people we do have, we need the right people, right? So
it's one of the things we're seeing regularly, Joe. Like we're actually, which, I don't think is a good part about our job, but we're getting quite a lot of, we need to replace somebody. They were great in a growth environment. Now we need a more structured cost, cash flow. We want to be over all of this sort of detail that we weren't before. So we're getting a lot of replacement confidential briefs coming through. I think that's something we will see into the next year. As you said, people are and businesses are understanding now that the landscape's different. We need different skill sets. Do we have the right person? And the brave companies are making those calls, and some of the others are just sort of sitting on their hands a little bit. But there's also optimistic signs out there too. Like I think the optimistic signs, we talk about the doom and gloom of JobKeeper and insolvency. Green shoots really in the Australian market probably sit with our ageing population. We have a lot of C-level executives across Australia that are heading towards retirement, and quite often these people are the ones that are getting potentially changed in this change agent time that we're talking about, but also potentially not up for leading a business through a recession and potentially deep recession. So we're starting to see, the movement of the baby boomer generation hitting retirement, starting to see that creating opportunities which should become a domino effect of jobs in the marketplace. And without the redundancy we saw in the GFC, it may mean that these people are coming from permanent jobs, which will create more opportunities in the background.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity, right? And I can't believe how quickly the time's gone, and there's questions I didn't even get to ask you, but thank you so much for your time today, Anthony. I think, the key things that I took lots away from that, but the key things around excellence, always striving for excellence, thinking about yourself as a football team and am I going to win this year? And if not, what did I learn? And how do I be better next year? Good humans and that whole relationship piece, the importance of your employees, the importance of recruitment, the importance of your customers and getting that connection piece right. And really playing to your strengths and thinking about your time, but also where you're putting your time based on your strengths and what your time is worth in terms of dollar value. So absolutely unbelievable insight. You've done amazingly with Sharp Carter. I'm absolutely positive that all of your actuals are going to be way above your worst case projections, because I think there's a lot of opportunity in the marketplace, and continue to work with you through Whiteark and the other adventures that my career takes me. But thank you so much for your time today, Anthony.
Thanks for having me. It's been great to be a part of the podcast.